I used the 50 strategies that I'm about to explain in this video to save more than $50,000 last year, which was more than 70% of my income. And that's why I'm on track to reach financial freedom before I turn 30 years old. So I'm making this video as a definitive guide for all of the different ways I save money. And I've broken these down into 7 big categories, which are roughly ordered from least to most important. So make sure you stick around for this entire video because the later strategies are the ones that will save you the most money. But let's start with clothes. The average American family spends about $2,500 on clothes every year, which isn't the biggest expense, but it is still kind of significant. And the reason that this is crazy to me is that even my best dressed friend, who I'm always making fun of for buying more and more clothes, still spends less than that every year. That's because she exclusively shops at thrift stores instead of buying new stuff. And other stores are also known for consistently running sales and discounts, which can save you a lot of money too. You can also find good deals at different times of the year. I was a track athlete, so I would always upgrade my gear right at the beginning of August. That was right after the summer track season ended, so there were always big sales. So make sure to shop seasonally when stores are trying to get rid of everything that they couldn't sell. And before I move on to the next big category of expenses, I did want to call out a couple of bonus ways to save money on almost any purchase you make online. For one, definitely use the cheaper shopping sites. For example, I've almost always found better deals on eBay than on Amazon. And plus, it's a lot easier to sort for the best prices. And second, I've been using the Honey browser extension for years now. This year, it actually saved me 20% when I filed my taxes. I'm not sponsored or partnered or anything like that. It's just a free extension that helps save more money, which I think is pretty cool. But let's move on to the next big category of expenses, which is fitness. And to be totally transparent here, I do have a pretty expensive gym membership. But most people do not need to spend that much money. So especially if you aren't using your gym membership, it might not be worth paying for. But before people freak out in the comments, let me be clear. Saving more money is not an excuse to not be healthy. It's just that you can stay really healthy by just working out outside. Hill sprints are actually one of my favorite workouts, and all you need is a hill. And if the weather is always terrible where you live, then don't worry. You can still get a great workout at home with nothing more than a yoga mat. And now we're getting into even more serious ways to save. And what I love about this next category of expenses is that even though the average American family is spending $4,700 per year, you could spend $0 per year. I don't even budget for these expenses. I'm talking about entertainment, and let me walk you through some of the many ways to save money here. The first strategy really shouldn't need saying, but some people need to hear it anyway. Stop paying for crap that you don't use. It drives me nuts that some people pay such little attention to their finances that they don't even know what they're paying for. You have to work for literally every dollar you earn, which means every dollar you waste is actually time from your life that you wasted. So if you are spending money on something, it should be adding real value to your life. And one of the fastest ways to start saving a few extra $1,000 per year is just by canceling your cable subscription. My generation has been a lot better about this, but there are still millions of people paying an average of $200 per month. Those ridiculous prices drove a lot of people to cheaper streaming sites. But then some people have so many streaming sites that they're paying almost as much as they were for cable. I personally don't pay for any of these streaming services, but one piece of advice I've heard, which I like, is to pick one subscription at a time. Once you've binged everything you want to watch on that platform, you can cancel your subscription and move to another one. And if you're thinking,
OMG, Charles, that seems like so much work.
Well, yeah, it is a little bit of work, but it's a lot of work to make enough money to pay for all of your streaming services. So you choose. And if you're wondering how you're going to fill your time after canceling all of your money-sucking streaming services, I've got a few ideas for you. And first up, touch grass. Like, literally. Going outside is free, and being in nature is actually kind of good for you. And you probably don't need this piece of advice, but watch YouTube videos instead. There's already so much free content online, and the only thing you have to do is smash the like button. And if video games are your thing, there are a ton of free video games that don't cost the traditional price of $60. I personally prefer to read books though, And there's even more good news, because you can get just about any book you want for free from your local library. I'm really not sure why anybody spends so much money on these. And if you like getting out and doing things, a lot of museums and other community centers have free days. And my favorite date ever was going on a free trip to a local art museum, which was super fun. But as a general rule, I try to turn my free time into something productive. There's definitely value in recharging, but I think it's so much better to learn something in your free time. And that doesn't have to be a monetizable skill, although it definitely could be. And you can also save a lot of money on your devices. Just about everyone has a cell phone, but some people are spending way more than others. I made a whole video on how phone companies are ripping you off, but it really comes down to just two factors. For one, you absolutely don't need a brand new phone every year. People will drop $1,000 on the latest iPhone, but I'm perfectly happy with my $250 phone. But the price of the phone is honestly a lot less important than what you pay for service every month. It honestly blows my mind that anybody would pay $90 a month for service when there are so many cheaper options available. Which of course is why the very first company I ever partnered with was Mint Mobile. Low prices are kind of their thing, which is why there's a link to them in the video description. But no matter who your service provider is, you'll save more money if you use less data. It seems like everywhere has free Wi-Fi now, so you really shouldn't need that much data. And if you don't need data, I don't know why you would pay for it. But with that, let's move on to the next category of expenses. And this category is maybe the most dangerous, because we're talking about debt. Now, there are a lot of misconceptions around debt. There are some people who are so afraid of debt that they'll tell you that you shouldn't even have a credit card, including really famous financial gurus like Dave Ramsey. But unless you're totally irresponsible with your money, you should absolutely have a credit card. Using a credit card to buy things you were already going to buy can definitely save you money. But credit cards get dangerous when you don't pay them off. Credit card debt is usually super high interest, so you should always pay off the entire balance, not just the minimum, every single month. But some people, a lot of people actually, are already in debt. They might have a mortgage on their house, a loan on their car, student loans, and credit card debt. So if that's you, you might want to think about refinancing your loans. Doing this can replace your current loans with a different loan that charges less interest. This can really be valuable on the high interest debt, like credit cards. And if you want to get out of debt as fast as possible, you should always pay off the highest interest debt first. It doesn't matter how much debt is at each interest rate. Paying off your highest interest debt first will always save you money over the long run as you make more and more interest payments. And look, we're almost halfway through all of the saving strategies that I use to save over $50,000 per year. And honestly, I'm really excited. Because if you're following along, you've probably already found a bunch of ways to save more money. And we haven't even talked about your 3 biggest expenses, which means you're going to find a lot more ways to save a lot more money by the end of this video. But before I jump into that, I just want to mention I made a huge guide of all of these different saving strategies, which I put in the video description so that you can reference them whenever you need to. But now let's move on to the 3 biggest expenses, and let's start with food. I wanted to start with food because this is probably the easiest way to save a lot more money. And there are some strategies that really should be obvious. Like if you want to save more money, then don't eat out at restaurants all of the time. Where I live, it's difficult to eat out for less than $30 per meal unless you go to a fast food place. And even that will be $20. For context, by using all of the strategies that I'm about to talk about, I spent less than $3 per meal last year. That's thousands of dollars in savings compared to the people who eat out all of the time. But on the occasions that you do eat out, I recommend going to less fancy places and going out for breakfast or lunch instead of dinner. I think that a lot of fancier restaurants have worse food, even though you'll be paying more. I'm almost always happier when I go to a small, locally owned restaurant that focuses on making great food instead of on appearances. And it's so much cheaper to go out for breakfast or lunch instead of dinner, which can make a huge difference too. But still, you really do want to avoid eating out as much as possible. And that's why I pack my own lunch every single day I go into the office. So many of my coworkers will pay $15 for lunch out of the local cafeteria instead of just spending a few minutes to prepare something for themselves. And yeah, I get it, it's very convenient to have a pre-made lunch, but it's also very convenient to not have to work 8 hours a day for the rest of my life just to afford my lifestyle. So personally, I would rather have the savings. I don't even want to get started on the does coffee cost your future debate, but guess what? You really should brew your own coffee instead of buying from a coffee shop. Fixing this one habit isn't going to make you a millionaire, but this is just one strategy out of 50, and all of them together can save you a ton of money. And there's just not much difference between coffee brewed at home and coffee you buy from a store. So it's just crazy to me that this has become such a big debate. But even if you've been fully convinced to never eat out and to always brew your own coffee, there are still a ton of ways to save more money. Just because you buy your own groceries doesn't mean you're spending as little as you could. For one, actually do your own grocery shopping. I never even thought about this, but it seems like half the people I know all have their groceries delivered. I really can't figure out why so many people spend so much money on this, but that goes for a lot of things, I guess. And when you do go grocery shopping, have a grocery list. Grocery stores are a business just like any other, and they want to trick you into spending more of your hard-earned money. But when you go to the store with a grocery list, it's easier to stay focused on what you actually needed. And something that has saved me a lot of money is going through the grocery store and writing down the prices of everything that I like to eat. What I noticed is there are some really big price differences between very similar foods. For example, grapes are super expensive compared to bananas. I do like grapes more than bananas, but only by a little bit. It was a no-brainer to just buy bananas instead for the cheaper price. And in some cases, the savings will be super obvious. If you compare store brand items to more popular name brand equivalents, you're almost always going to see lower prices on the store brand. These are usually almost the exact same thing, but one is way cheaper than the other. But at least for some foods, you might have to do this comparison every few months. And that's because some foods, especially fruits and vegetables, have different prices depending on the time of year. And this is another way to save money. When you eat foods that are in season, you get the best deals every time you shop. And this next strategy keeps my life simpler and cheaper. Whenever I go grocery shopping, I buy as much as I can of whatever I'm buying. Buying in bulk actually has two different benefits. For one, buying larger quantities of food almost always comes with cheaper prices. Buying a gallon of milk is always going to be cheaper than buying 2 half-gallons of milk. The second benefit of buying in bulk is that it makes it way easier to meal prep, which is actually the next saving strategy. Meal prepping helps avoid waste because you're eating the same thing. So that means you get the benefit of saving money by buying in bulk without having to worry about throwing stuff away. And meal prepping also makes it so much easier to avoid eating out. Because whenever I get home from work and I'm feeling tired and lazy and I don't want to cook, well, I'm still never tempted to order out. Because I already have a meal prepared. I already did the cooking. And one strategy that I feel like I don't see anyone talk about is just to eat really filling meals. A lot of junk food makes you crave more food. So finding a few good filling options makes it way easier to not only save money, but also, more importantly, be way healthier. And this last strategy to save money on food is a really big one. Just don't buy crap that you don't need. I almost exclusively drink water because it's effectively free, and that means I'm never wasting money on juice and soda. And I completely avoid unhealthy snacks like chips and crackers, and I almost never buy dessert and other super sugary stuff either. There can be a time and a place for all of those things, but if you're looking to save more money, these are super obvious expenses to cut. And by using all of these strategies, I spent less than $1,900 on food last year. Averaged across 3 meals a day, that's less than $2 per meal. But with that, we're ready to move on to the second biggest expense that most people have. And I actually think that this is costing a lot of people a lot more money than they think. I'm talking about transportation. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average family spends over $16,000 per year on this. Now, that's almost as much money as I spent in all of last year. But the good news is that you can save almost all of that. And last year, I actually spent less on transportation than I did on food. And if you want to start saving a ton of money on transportation, you really need to start with thinking about where you live. The whole purpose of transportation is to take you from one point to another point. So you'll need a lot less transportation if you already live close to the things that you visit very frequently. So for me, I was very careful about choosing a place to live where I was super close to my office, a grocery store, and my gym. Those were the 3 places that I knew I would visit extremely often, so I wanted to be super close to all of them. And in the last few years, there's been this huge push to working remotely. Every single day that you work remotely, you're saving time and money on your commute. And if you live close enough to all of the places you go to very frequently, you can use one of the most powerful savings hacks there is, which is riding a bike. Since I was so particular about where I lived, I still haven't had to buy a car yet. So the average single person like me is spending $8,500 per year on transportation, but I'm spending almost $0. But when you do need to go further than you can bike, then you can always use public transportation, carpooling, or ride sharing. I'm a huge fan of public transportation, and I can get almost everywhere I need to be just by using this system. But I know that some cities are not as good as mine, especially in America. But if you go somewhere super frequently, like your office, then definitely look into carpooling. There is no reason that multiple people should all be wasting their money on commuting and adding even more pollution. And on the very rare occasions I need it, I do use ride sharing like Uber to get wherever I need to be. This is pretty expensive, but it's still a lot less expensive than owning my own car. But even if you can't go car free, there are still huge differences in how much money people spend on their car. Most of the costs of owning a car are not the purchase price. It's the maintenance, gasoline, and insurance that makes up most of the expenses. And I keep seeing brand new sports cars whenever I bike to work, which are way more expensive than what you need. A reliable used car off of Craigslist isn't going to turn as many heads. But your goal should not be to turn heads. It should be to save way more money and reach financial freedom. But driving is not the only transportation expense. Another big expense can be vacations. To save money here, I try to go on more local trips. When I do go on a vacation, I try to go on a few long trips instead of a lot of short ones to save money on plane tickets. And I like to travel to friends and family anyway, which also means I save money on hotels. So now we're ready to move on to the most powerful ways to save more money. The average American family spends almost $30,000 per year on housing, although this does vary a lot by the region. So saving money on housing can make a huge difference on your wealth. But let's start with some of the basics. One of the simplest things you can do is just turn off the lights. This one actually drives me crazy because some of my roommates just leave on lights that have no reason to be on. This isn't the biggest cost in the world, but it's just a waste. Being smart about your energy and water usage can save you hundreds of dollars per year. Another big expense can be what you put in your house. It always blows my mind just how expensive furniture is, so I try to always get secondhand furniture that other people are getting rid of. I did buy a relatively cheap mattress, but all of my other furniture was pre-owned. Most of it was actually left in my apartment when I moved in. And it also can really pay to be handy. You can spend a lot of money if you always have to hire professional cleaners, plumbers, and electricians for every small little thing. Learning to do just basic repairs, or at least taking the time to Google it and see if you can do it yourself, is really helpful. Just really simple things like changing my shower head and unclogging my sink drain have already saved me a fair amount of money. But you won't see real savings on housing without thinking about where you live. And these next strategies that I'm about to share have all saved me thousands of dollars. If you've watched a lot of my videos, you know I live in an extremely expensive area. And with average rent of almost $3,000 per month, I really wanted to find a few ways to cut my costs. And I realized very quickly that how much money you spend on rent depends a lot on the very specific location you want to live. If I wanted to live in a luxury high-rise apartment building within walking distance to a subway station, I could be spending over $4,000 per month on just a one-bedroom apartment. But live a few blocks away next to a bus stop, and I could spend half of that. Living away from the city hubs is a much more peaceful and a lot cheaper way to live. And another big difference is just where you look for apartments. If you search for apartments, a lot of the top websites will show you really fancy apartment buildings. but you can find much better deals over on sites like Craigslist. And honestly, you can still find a lot of really nice apartments there too. And another benefit of using a site like Craigslist is you can take advantage of one of the most powerful savings hacks there is, which is living with roommates. I'm managing to spend less than $1,000 a month on housing, even though I have a private bedroom and a private bathroom. In my area, that just wouldn't be possible if I wasn't living with roommates. And I don't get why so many people are against this. They'll literally share a bedroom with someone when they're in college, but then as soon as someone has a job, they refuse to have roommates, which is just so silly to me. This one decision is saving me $10,000 to $20,000 every single year. This is a huge reason that I'm on track to retire before I turn 30 years old. And there's just one more saving strategy that I need to talk about. But before I explain it, I just want to remind you that there's a full downloadable guide in the video description that has all of these saving strategies. I know there is no way you're going to remember all of these different strategies, so I just wanted to make sure you had a free resource that you could reference whenever you need it. And with that, let's move on to saving strategy number 50. And this one is actually kind of special because you have two options, and I can't tell you which one is right for you. I'm talking about the decision to buy or rent. People have really strong opinions on this, but which one is right for you really does depend on a lot of factors. If you're in a growing city and expect to be there for a long time, then buying a house might make a ton of sense. But I expect to move at least a few more times while I'm early in my career, so I prefer to keep my money saved and invest it in the stock market. So the right answer really does depend. I'm thinking about making a whole video on this, but let me know in the comments if that would be interesting. But now that you know all 50 of these strategies to save more money, you have to actually put them into practice. And that's actually why I've been writing my first book, which has the frameworks I use to increase my income and decrease my expenses, along with a step-by-step guide for saving your first $100,000. If you want to join the waitlist for that, it's also in the video description. So by now, you know everything you need to know to start saving serious amounts of money. You might not be able to save $50,000 per year, but I guarantee you can save a lot. So here's what I want you to do. Choose at least 5 of these 50 strategies and commit to implementing them. And let me know which 5 strategies you're going to use in the comments so I can make more content that's even more helpful for you. If you do that, I guarantee you're going to save more money and reach your financial goals so much faster. And if you want to see how I used all of the strategies that I just explained in this video to save my first $100,000 in less than a year and a half, then you just need to check out this video right here.